This is the first roundtable of Chapel and York. I'm Ligia Peña. I'm director of the Canadian branch of Chapel and York. I'm going to introduce to you Nancy. She's the director here. Nancy, te toca.
You're muted.
Estás en mute. Estás en silencio.
You need to unmute, Nancy.
Hola, buenos días. Soy Nancy Bixon, directora general. Bienvenidos al primer Benito en español de Chapel and York.
Welcome to the first roundtable of Chapel and York.
Su trabajo de recaudación de fondos internacional.
To do fundraising, international
fundraising.
fundraising.
I'm sorry, but I must leave you all now in the great hands of my colleague Ligia and her speakers, and I wish you all a very good session and with lots of information. Bye.
Gracias, Nancy. Thank you. Bueno, eso era Nancy, que es la directora general de la compañía Chapel.
That was Nancy. She's the general director of Chapel and York. And she wished us a good roundtable. I would like to ask everyone to please turn on your cameras. It would be very nice to have everyone to share and to speak amongst ourselves. So it's better to speak when we are seeing the person. However, if it's necessary, and if you would like to have the translation to English, there is a button at the bottom. There is a button next to the exit button where you cancel the call, and it says interpretation or translation. It has a globe, and you can change the language. Yes, please. I'm very proud to introduce to you two very well-respected people in this sector. First, I want to introduce Gustavo Ugalde to you, who is director of fundraising for Peru UNICEF. Welcome, Gustavo. And second is Victor Naranjo, who is director of philanthropic resources, which is a consulting service in philanthropy, and he works all across Latin America. Victor and Gustavo, welcome. Very nice to meet you. Let's start. I want to ask you, and then we're going to start talking from there. This is not a presentation, so it's going to be an informal talk. So if anyone in the meeting has any questions, just raise your hand, introduce yourselves, and you may ask the question. First thing to address, could you please speak a little about how fundraising is introduced in Latin America, especially over the last few years, going through a year of pandemic, and that impacted all fundraising activities? Victor, Gustavo, please, who would like to go first? Well, I can start, no problem. Well, fundraising in Latin America, from my perspective, I've been in this field for 12 years in Mexico, in Latin America, and now in Peru for 12 years, had a strong component that related to international cooperation. More than 10 years ago, probably, when most Latin American countries were cataloged as a low income, at that time, there was a lot of help that was being given to Latin American countries, a lot of philanthropy going into these countries. Now, especially the big organizations, they were in need, or they were basing a lot on international cooperation funds, DFI, JAGA, etc. However, it's been like 10 or 14 years, several organizations started to detect that there was potential in the region. That you might think that Greenpeace was one of the founders or the initiators. And in Argentina, for example, Argentina is very outstanding in the sorry is very important, relevant in the business, in the sector of fundraising, and this opens, and other alternatives have been opened, and some organizations have transferred their efforts to fundraising from individuals. So nowadays we now have a diverse overview in which, on the one hand, we have lower international cooperation fundraising, although Latin American countries are now considered as medium income. Okay, but on the other hand, major donors have increased their donations, and also individual people have increased their donations. I don't have the exact figure, but UNICEF has calculations related that have to do that mention like around 1 million active individual donors at this time. So we have a good lead, or good to follow this effort to try to get the potential out of this. However, there are other enterprises that are more advanced, like legacies, like middle major donors, that are they are the tip or the top of the pyramid for fundraising. It starts with cooperation. The next level is major donors. Then we have individual donors, and then at the top we have the legacy programs. What has happened with this pandemic? In this pandemic, we have seen, from my perspective, it has been tough. We have seen a downturn, loss of jobs. In general, the gross revenue of the countries has decreased. However, from my perspective, donors have stuck around. Most of them. This also should respond to and organizations have come up with solutions for this. When the COVID started, the first thing I told my boss was, let's forget about the goal for this year. Is going to be like near apocalypse situation, but it wasn't like that. Fortunately, we were able to grow 50% by 50% in Peru. That was something very positive. However, I know that not all organizations have done well. However, a lot of them, they became so nervous that they designed response plans, so to cope with COVID, and people didn't know what was going on, and they said, well, let's support these initiatives. I'm conscious, however, that not all organizations have done well, and some or have are having trouble right now. And with this, in this chat, in this talk, we're going to give them advice so that they can get something of the loss of what they lost, that they can take it back, they can have it back. Now, some countries who had a consciousness of social responsibility, also they launched new initiatives that were interesting or appealing to private companies. So some companies, there were companies who did well, but others who were big losers. Like tourism industry, that was they suffered a big hit. And in Costa Rica, we see, for example, like Costa Rica is their income, their gross revenue product depends on tourism, and they did very bad last year. Mexico also suffered an impact of COVID, but there are other countries or other companies, private companies, like food and beverage, pharmacological companies, that became like interesting players, and that we could just think of them, consider them as possible donors, like knock on their doors and see if they can make donations. Now, something important, Ligia, is that we also, as a response to the pandemic, has evolved over the last 15 months. At first, it was just the measures like use your anti-sanitation gel and the face mask, but now we're using technological resources so that children can have access to education. It has shifted towards support plans for mental health, because we have been affected by we're locked down, sorry, this paranoia and the fear and the solitude, and so the mental plans have received support. Also plans how to reactivate schools in a safe way. there's a limitation, of course, to going back to school, because a lot of schools did not have access to, to running water, to, good services. So now there is a need that we identified, and so that resource economic of fundraising can come and cope with this. So we have to come up with plans post-pandemic. Unfortunately, poverty are going to improve. That's a fact in Latin America. So organizations who can respond to those needs, and they don't have, it doesn't have to be a humanitarian agency or organization. Those that focus on small producers or women, and they are going to have a lot of opportunities to come back and say to the donor, you know what, there is an opportunity here that you can make a difference for others. And also, the climate change, it has to be also something very important. The pandemic has opened the eyes to all those things about the world and the collectiveness of humanity. But nature, is like, we cannot make those kind of predictions, like the COVID and the global change. We cannot predict that. Nature has its own way. So further, we're going to talk about specific products in this discussion, in this talk, to see if you have questions, and we're going to continue talking about this. It's about major donors, and let's see what we're going to just make the questions. So Victor, uh, so you said pretty much everything, so everything is fine. You said everything. Next time, let me start so I can say something. I get to say something. Okay. About the first topic, Latin America, I totally agree with you. Like your overview, your perspective. I've been in this business for 30 years, but I went through the same pattern that he described. I'm going to focus on donors of the organizations who do fundraising, how it becomes more personalized. I can tell, I've noticed that donors have become more and more professional, or there has been a higher level of professionalization in the business. Some enterprises have created specific functions for their staff. Governments, national governments, and local governments, they have opened the possibility to financing from NGOs, and in a more professional way and more systematically too. And individuals also, they have become more professional over the last few years, through the massive bombardment of telethons and massive campaigns and all those things. We have found Greenpeace people, people in the malls, in the markets, and then they have become more. There's been more contact with these people, so people have become more familiar. People in the families have become more familiar with this topic of fundraising or donating money, donating funds. I want to talk about now about large donors. There are families or groups who keep their decision in a traditional way. Like the grandfather, the grandmother, and the uncle in the family, Uncle Joe, who became a nun, and then she's the one in charge in the family who runs who makes the decisions or helps in the decisions of fundraising or donating to a certain organization. So in the past, going out and try to get fundraising, you were looked at like, well, what's going on? So what do you do? We were looked down or looked down as like you were weird. What do you do? Uh, then if participants are interested, I can talk about um, also my recent experience is with major donors. If you want to talk about this, you can ask me questions. And about COVID, I think what you said, Gustavo, was it was right on the money about COVID. What is really interesting, so everything you have mentioned that is going down in Latin America is what has been observed in North America, in Europe, and in other parts of the world. Obviously, it's somewhat different, or it's a bit different, but what I've come to realize, I'm from Argentina, but I was born, I was raised in Canada, in Montreal. Now I work I'm a consulting agent in the topic of legacies or agencies at an international level. So now I'm also doing my PhD on this subject, and it's very interesting to realize or to see this analysis that about from fundraising in other countries in Europe, in Australia, and in North America too. There are a lot of organizations that you know that got their best year in 2020 for fundraising, as for fundraising ever. But we have to note, and this is has to do with what Victor was mentioning, that there are organizations who have learned that some donors are very faithful over the years. So it's very important to maintain relationship with this long-lasting donors. This is super important to maintain this relationship. So these organizations who were successful, these were the ones who saw that that was the most important thing to keep and to further and to nurture the relationship with the donors. A couple of details to enlarge upon what Gustavo said. There was an increase in generosity among the regular population. From a personal view, I discovered some prospects that had been analyzing for years and that had never like donated money to my clients, and I was doubtful that they had the actual capacity to make donations, but last year they confirmed, they cleared up my doubts, and they were able to make donations. Like for example, in the Dominican Republic, like there were families that were like making donations of up to $1 million to cope with COVID-19, and that was not through an NGO. It was the local municipality, the government, or the tourism chamber, and they were just networking. And they said, we're having people and they're dying, so let's raise like fast. Let's get $1 million to cope with this. And this happened in the yeah, it's a fact. This happened, and this happens also during after natural disasters when the generosity of people sparks, goes to high levels. And these kind of situations, they make this kind of feeling and response and donations to come out and explode in a positive way. Now there is something else about like who's calling, who's making contact, who was networking, who was able to contact the top guy in Guadalajara, that guy with the big box. So personal contact, when you have the chance and talk to these people to start this networking chain of donations. I want to pick up on something that Victor said about the professionalization of donors. He mentioned at the beginning of his intervention. It was great, and I also agree that fundraising has become more professional in the region of Latin America, and we've seen it. In his 30 years in this field, he has seen more progress, more professionalization. Like 12 years ago when I started, it was very difficult to find a specialist in this subject who was telemarketing expert or an expert in major donors, and and a legacy expert, that didn't even exist. So what happened? So we as organizations, we had to find professionals from the private sector who had the motivation to do the crossover to the fundraising business. Yeah, but you could offer him, but you couldn't like compete with the salaries that they were making in the private industry. However, we had to find somebody who was motivated and who, even with a less pay, he was willing to do and follow his passion to fundraise and get money for organizations or people who need it. So over the last few years, I've had work with people who work with me, and now they have, even if they're doing different things, they stick around in the terms of fundraising. So fundraising has become a stronger sector. The generosity has grown, as Victor said. More people, the number of people who know about this organization like ours, they know about us, so they know that they have to, or they feel compelled to make donations, on a monthly basis, and this didn't happen in the past. And now it was one of in Latin America, because they lived in an environment of high corruption, levels of corruption, high inequalities. So they didn't used to think that the fundraising was like the way to go because of this, bad reputation. But once they saw that the sector became stronger, all right, like for example, well, in the case of Argentina, they also received this, this new trend, and they started making donations. In Argentina, all right, and some of these organizations have expanded, like Greenpeace, and they have expanded their branches to South America, to Brazil and Argentina. And well, I just wanted to delve further into, telling you how it's easier now to find professional people working in fundraising. Now, my experience in Peru, there was no face-to-face agencies in the past. Now we have face-to-face agencies, but it's not like the Mexican or the Brazilian market where there are like 10 or 15, or in Chile too. So, but we've seen an evolution that is positive in the sector, where more opportunities have opened, and it's also and a sector that is constantly demanding more professionals. So the people who studied majors, who majored in something that has to do with cooperation, so that universities who have these majors, so that they don't just teach, the the programmatic side of this, but the humanistic side, because that's about what fundraising is about. I have people who are volunteering now, who are working for me now, or with us, and they say, I thought I was going to go to a community, and they were going to deliver some, like rice and beans, the bags and all that. But when then they realize that in Latin America, that what they need is to do like a little bit of politics, to know how to make connections. It's not just like going to the small communities and and help people directly. In fact, what you said is exactly, well, that's my experience. I studied political science, international, and I wanted to do that kind of work. But I also, when I was younger, I did fundraising, and I did it through the organizations that were available. So for me, it was great. So I ended up doing this major, fundraising major. It's very interesting what you're saying, because that's exactly what more people are. Well, when the universities start offering these new courses about fundraising, on when professional organizations start to invite speakers from other countries to talk about a specific topic that, in which there is no specialty in their native country. So an expert comes out. So that professionalization of the major of fundraising starts to pick up, starts to change. The same thing happened in Canada when I started 20 years ago. There was no program in universities or colleges, and nowadays almost every college or university has one. So now it's much easier now when you have to do recruitment from a pool of candidates, people who have already gone through the theory at university.
¿Quieres responder a esta pregunta?
Would you like to answer this question? I was thinking about your question. I was thinking of the question of Marianne from our Marina Diaz. The opening of markets, I think, as Gustavo said, the market is not yet untapped. It's still untapped. So we're still behind the United States. So, but the market is huge. We're still behind the United States and Europe. There's still populations in Latin America who don't donate. They do not donate to any organization, because nobody has knocked on their doors so that they make donations. So there is an aspect of educating the regular population, to tell them that we are not the local church, that we are not that we don't do art. uh, but there is a way always to find a way to connect to a fundraising market. So I call this opening up new doors in this market. Now, next is the involvement of the directive boards in terms of fundraising. This connects to what Gustavo said about the professionalization of the trade, which has been still is still a challenge. A lot of cities or countries, there are no people, or so they don't know. So it's difficult to make people to make them stick around and try this, stick around, and and develop their careers in this sector. And also, a lot of these organizations, they think that fundraising is just to hire Ligia or Gustavo or myself or Mariana, and they are magicians who are going to bring in the money. But that's not the case. Directive boards don't see in themselves as opening, are trying to tap into their business or business friends, connections, networking. The founders, they are the friends of Paco, and they were all violin players. So we only have violin players. So they only do art. So there's no strategic thinking to try to find people who represent different sectors and who can help to tap into other markets, so to speak. Also, there is no induction process to these people so that they they are aware that their part of their job is to network among their own network. Uh-huh. And so that and try to open up these directive boards seats so that other people who have these connections or the networking, so that the networking, so the directive board should be more inclusive to opening up to other members that have these networks or who have this ability to do more networking with their networks and finding more people who can become donors. So the first thing I came up, I thought about what you said, that was the directive boards. They have to open up to tap into new markets, etc., etc. I would like to complement what Victor said. His appreciation of his view is right on the money. Um, in my experience, I've seen two topics. I see it from a perspective of what happened to me. There are organizations who are more international, who have a greater capacity to mobilize resources, and the small ones. Now, for the small ones, the biggest challenge is, they don't know at all. They think it's too expensive, it's way too expensive. However, there are strategies who can give you a better return on investment. But like I said, there is a lot of misinformation, or they don't have the information. But as Victor said, there are governance meetings, and people, they see this as a luxury. We cannot afford a professional person. They are looking always for a volunteer. But we have gone, in my opinion, we have gone past to, oh, just a volunteer. We need a professional, right? No, so they decide not to invest. There are less resources. So if you invest less, then organizations can go into trouble because they are they have to face this reduction into Latin America funds that was reduced over the last 15 years, as I said before. Yeah, and like we said, when you are granted one of these specific resources, you are like you won the lottery. But as we said, they have been reducing over the years in Latin America. Now, the greatest limitation for these small organizations is the investment that they are making into fundraising. Because, for example, one of these programs is kind of expensive. There is a fund on there's return on investment that happens also in the long term, to 5 to 10 years. But the necessity is now. So they need to make decisions that are difficult. Should I invest now in my program for supporting the people that I'm, or do I invest so that in 5 years I can have people who can do fundraising, at a greater scale? So I think that's one of the challenges that Victor mentioned. Another challenge that is very interesting, in my opinion, la- sorry, uh, regrettably in Latin America, there is a huge inequality in Latin America. A lot of people who have a medium to low income, and only a small percentage of people who have a high income. So, and how can you mobilize people who at present do not make donations, but maybe who could make much smaller donations, but who could be more massive? So instead of having just a very few people to donate a big amount, to have a large amount to donate small money. And that would be something to work out in Latin America, because Europe and Latin America are so they have such a disparity in income. But Latin America, we're we're still talking to a small number of the population who makes donations. So whoever is able to tap into the mass market of the regular person in Latin America is going to open up that door for all the rest of the organizations. He's going to be like genius. And I remember that when I was younger, when I was years ago, I thought about fundraising as, like somebody said, it's like campaigning for something, because you're not just asking the person to give you your vote, but you're asking also for his credit card. So to get somebody to give you his credit card is the greatest mobilization action that you can get. Honestly, like nowadays, who are you handing over your credit card to? Nobody, right? So you're giving it to somebody to do something. So for me, it's interesting. Not even your couple you will give your credit card to. And that's why it's so important for all organizations to normalize the concept of the small organizations, because there's still a lot of people who think that philanthropy is that you have to be rich, as you said before, that you have to, but it's not like philanthropy. You have to present it to people in a more democratic way. That doesn't mean you have to be a big donor. And that's a big problem in the sector, not just in Latin America, but around the world. We we have damaged ourselves because we have always talked about philanthropy from the point of view of the big donors who make the big donations, who revolutionize an organization. But really, those are not those are not the donations that have the greater impact. It is the small donations which are consistent throughout the years. Now, something, Victor, I'm going to let you talk, but there's something I forgot before, is what I always find interesting. I don't know if you have noticed, an element trust barometer. Okay, she's going to share the link. This is a big agency of public relations, and they do a international barometer of the level of trust of the population towards the institutions, governments, and and NGOs, etc. And it's very interesting to see, you know, what what it looks like, the barometers that Victor, your turn. You wanted to say something? I would like to make two comments. The first one has to do with Mariana's question about incentives, such as the tax reduction. And the second one is a little more complex, how there is a competition between among institutions to do fundraising or to get fundraising. Let me start with taxes. Through my experience, it's a myth. My opinion, incentives, fiscal incentives, are not the main reason why people donate. That is a conversation I've had with colleagues from the USA, where they they're the ones who to decide. We have more modern laws every time that have fostered the fiscal benefit of enterprises. But because we thought that if we increase the level of legislation, philanthropy would increase, but that's not true. Even with incentives in the United States for private companies. But in my experience in Latin America, I remember like several times that some donors were a donor. So this guy comes in and he says, well, is there an incentive? I'm going to make a donation, or you are a registered organization. But this is after the fact of the donation. So the most important reasons why somebody decides to make a donation were other reasons, not really the fiscal factor in Latin America. The in corporate philanthropy, of course, the most important factor is fiscal deduction. Marketing, in human resources. That's the question. I mean, that's the most common question. But but that has not been a factor. That has not been a factor for one organization, private corporate, to decide to donate to one company or another. That's my opinion. Now, the topic I want to bring up is international cooperation. It's still around. It still exists in the region. International cooperation. The the departure or the disappearance, the gradual disappearance of international cooperation in some countries, like in Honduras, Haiti, where there have been where they're still eligible for this kind of cooperation. However, even the international cooperation has evolved in these countries, so their approach, in this has is connected to well, is they're trying to see if they can replicate this in Africa and other countries. So there are new trends, and what I want to culturally culturally, if I come close to a client who has lived from international fundraising, individual donors doesn't. I mean, it boggles their mind. It boggles their mind. They cannot imagine that that happens. Yeah, for them it's only the local corporations. Yeah, for some of these organizations to do fundraising is to get donors, to make donors, and this is a paradigm by opening up the vision for everyone that there is a mixture of strategies where we can still keep looking for money for international projects, but we can also like tap into the local donors and individual donors and large donors. So this mix is what I find more health. I find it healthier for the financial sustainability. But let me finish what I started. There are some directive boards that are like they are they want like a super proposal, so to send it to an organization and just to be waiting getting the money. And that's a big challenge. You know, the people who are so stubborn and they don't really know the meaning of fundraising. I want to complement what Victor said about the how the directive boards, they are so stubborn to change their ways, to change their thinking. I'm really, I mean, who wouldn't want to bring in resources? And this is incredible that these organizations or boards, they don't want to make changes. I'm to give you an example. So no, no, I don't need resources. I don't want resources, because that's like corrupting the ethos of the organization. So that's like bringing capitalism to the organization, and we are more democratic, etc. And for me, I was surprised to hear that, because the resource that we are using doesn't come from nature. It has to be generated through fundraising campaigns, but in North America. So it's very important to foster among organizations from within the South America. So organizations can donate within South America to try to reduce disparity in social disparity in South America. I would be very very proud to be able to contribute to an organization that becomes self-sufficient in the context of Latin America or South America. However, this, I know, it's very difficult to switch to change the paradigm, to think that resource mobilization means that you have to ally with the sector that we see, that the sector that like that contaminates the world, like extractive industries, that we are going to partner with them, and so we have to change the paradigm. We have to change our view, because they are not the bad guy in the movie. They can make important contributions, and you can change reality when you ally with an enterprise that has a big impact on the environment. So while you are contributing or you're making a donation, well, you could also, while you're at it, you could change a little bit your contaminating, all right, so that you can get a benefit beyond the money, the fundraising. All right. And I'm sending a hi to Mariana.
Ah, súper genial. Y bueno, ahora veo, la hora pasa rápido, entonces ahora, la pregunta ahora es, ¿qué ven para el futuro en la región?
What do you see for the future?
Todo en este tema de la recaudación. Y yo quisiera decir
Fundraising.
recaudados, pero bueno, vamos a ver.
What do you see for the future in fundraising for the region? Well, what I can see for the future is that individual donors, corporate philanthropy, and major donors are going to come together. Also, government sources, local municipalities, specialized board, they have a tendency to become more professional. That's what I predict for the future. There's going to be more competition. There's going to be more professionalization. People will have more options where to choose from. I need to add, this is related to challenges and opportunities. The effect of technology in the last 30 years. In the past, we had to send somebody, a courier on a motorcycle, to pick up, the donation, and with the money in hand. But now we have social networks, we have telephones, cell phones and internet that can reach different sectors. We have other organizations who reach to the corporations themselves and the rich families. So there's going to be a competition that's going to stimulate the professionalization of organizations, fundraising organizations. That's my first comment. Totally agree. Victor also, he just said what I was going to say. I think fundraising in the future in Latin America has a future of growth, and I'm very glad because we're not in a stagnant market. No, we are in a market that is growing. I see more competition in the future. Yes, and from organization that I worked for many years ago, we used to call them. They are our friends, but they are like friends we are competing with for the fundraising. We're friends. We're trying to save the world, but we have a healthy competition. So it's going to be for the face to face. It's going to be harder with more competition. You know, you know, we have the Greenpeace guys and the Red Cross. Everybody's like in the street, and they are trying to get fundraising. So there's competition, and you can even see this in the larger countries in the region. But this could also grow to the medium size and the smaller markets in Latin America. Now, second, that there's going to be an increase and fundraising through digital platforms. So for us as organizations, we need to learn. Although we won't become web designers, web programmers, but we need training to become at the same level of what technology is demanding. And also, there's going to be a massification. Well, there's going to be more more public figures that could be influencers, or I don't know, who are going to ally with donators. Like for example, in Korea, there is K-pop stars in Korea, like band boys, and then they say something, and teenagers are going to listen to these people because they are their idols. So if they say, please make a donation. So we want to try. Well, this kind of trend is going to happen in Latin America. So the first one who can tap into that market is going to be the big winner, and everybody is going to come after that. And also we need to learn more about Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and all that, because the young people are interested in these new technologies, and they're going to become people in their 30s who are going to be settled and have a good income. So these organizations who are able to connect with these young generations of today, they're going to become the winners in 10 years. And last but not least, I want to say that there's going to be more multi-millionaire donations in the future, because this Latin American elite who has a lot of power, economical power, and fundraising with these, and these people are going to become more aware, more conscious of the COVID and the pandemic. So, and they are going to realize that they want to make donations. So although the impact has been more on the low levels, low income levels of society, however, yeah, the big causes are going to be there, like poverty, famine, environment, the women's movement, and has become very strong in Argentina, in the south, and now in Chile, in Mexico, and this topic has been very strong, and global warming, and the inequality and poverty in Latin America.
Súper interesante. Entonces, las cosas se presentan bien,
So it
aunque
looks good for the
ojalá
future.
que los sistemas políticos y
We,
económicos
we are hoping also
no
for
cambien a futuro
political
y
and
que se
economical
mantengan
systems
estable,
become or are still stable,
estable como es la región, ¿no? O sea,
and the
no
region as
tenga
well.
impactos sobre esto. Ahora bien, yo quisiera ver si
I would like to
los que
see
están en la
those
sala, si
in the
tienen algunas
chat if they
preguntas.
have any
Nos
questions.
quedan unos 12
We have
minutos,
a
entonces
few
tenemos
minutes, but
tiempo
we still
para
have time, all right,
preguntas,
to have some of your
discusiones.
questions.
Si quieren hablar,
If you
pueden
would like to talk,
abrir el audio
you can
y
open
no
your
necesitan
audio.
escribirlo en el chat
You don't need to write it down in the chat.
Alan.
Alan,
¿Qué tal? Muy buenos días acá en México.
good morning to everyone from Mexico. Thank you for the information.
Gustavo, bastante útil y valiosa.
Victor and Gustavo, very valuable.
De Educación para Compartir. Nosotros
I'm from
somos
Educación para
internacional.
Compartir. This
Y
is
bueno,
the name of my
ya con
organization. We are
las
also an international organization.
comentaban,
Considering,
es cierto que
well,
cooperación
in
internacional
topics of international
sí hay
cooperation,
una tendencia
there is a tendency,
pues a la
a
baja,
trend
digamos,
that
de
is down
recursos y formas
uh,
también
in different ways
facilitar
to
estos fondos,
find
¿no?
these
Y digamos que con
funds,
una estrategia
to tap into
diversificada
these
donde
funds. However, through a
agregadas
diversified strategy
donantes mayores,
that includes
recurrentes,
major
pues esto
donors,
busca
recurring
también apoyar a
donors,
convocatorias internacionales,
and
nacionales,
apply also
y esto
for
hablamos también de
international
fundraising.
donors, etc.
Mi pregunta acá es,
My
¿qué
question is,
pasa
what
con
happens
temas específicos de
in
cooperación internacional con
specific
estas
topics of
agencias
international cooperation
internacionales
with
como
these
la USAID,
international
como la
agencies
Unión
such as
Europea?
EC
¿Qué
and the
pasa
European Union?
con este tipo
What
de
happens
aliados,
with these
igual
allies?
no sé si hay ahorita
I
esta
don't know
oportunidad para
if this is a good
fondos
chance right now,
movidos respecto a América
how
Latina, si
how
pueden dar una pequeña
fundraising from
perspectiva
these
de cómo
organizations has
visualizan
come
ustedes
to Latin America.
esta estrategia
What's your
de
view on
cooperación
this strategy
con
of
agencias
fundraising
similares
from
como
these
USAID y la Unión Europea?
organizations that he mentioned? It's an open question
De ustedes tres.
for you three. Let me tell about the Americans first. They're very influenced by the political, also Central America and Mexico. The, media caravans of these families towards the United States, the images and photographs, tragic actually. They have they have brought the attention to how incentivize people or families to stay in Central America so that they don't migrate to the US. We have noticed that there are funds for that, and it's important sums. About the Europeans, I cannot give you I cannot zero in that much. I know they have been working in Africa and Asia. That's as far as I can tell you about their presence in Africa and Asia. Gustavo, I agree with Victor. It all depends on when they join forces. When, for example, when Trump arrived to the United States, there were reductions of, and a lot of international organizations were cut down on funds, especially since they were supporting sexual and reproductive rights. And Trump said, we're going to cut down, we're going to cut off this fund allotment, because United States, when they make donations, they have a political background, a political backdrop. So if there is like a Trump figure like in the presidency, he would try to, if there's a right wing, he would support right wing organizations more than left wing organizations. However, United States help is so big that we still think that is going to be big. However, so if Biden is reelected, we will expect a greater or a strong cooperation to continue to Central America and Latin America, because it becomes a problem in the United States in the end. So we can expect that with Biden, it will continue. DFID is going to have a cut down of several hundred thousand sterling pounds. So that's bad news. So DFID is going to reduce their donations, and the rest of Europe, it will depend on the political backdrop. For example, that will depend on the future. For example, I think there's a good outlook from Europe to Latin America, but some parties, some local parties, political parties, they will decide to make donations into Europe first and then into other countries like Latin America. But yeah, I agree that it's good to have a diversified portfolio, because if you trust that much on one big donor in a country that is going to undergo a major political change, you could end up without that major donation. So that's why you need to have, you don't keep all your eggs in one basket, so that you have a big number of donors, diversification of donors, so that if one is out, you still have the others. I don't know if what I'm going to say is going to be like nonsense, but let me say it anyway. Now we have local, so that we get, so this is a 5 million project, and we have a donor or a group of donors who are going to come up with $1 million. That's a new story for them. So if they have to decide between giving to a country in Africa and somebody from Mexico comes, there is a, we already have put up some money so that you can put up with the rest of the money. I worked 10 years with these people, and it's always a personal issue. Fundraising is who is where, who is the contact, the networking. If you need somebody from Britain who speak to people in London or the European Union, or if you have a friend in Japan, or you have a friend who speaks Japan and he can help you liaise with somebody in Japan, and now you have to read 25 proposals and he's overwhelmed. But there's one that comes from your friend who has your phone number and calls you. So then you're going to give priority to this one. This 25 proposals, you're going to choose the one that comes from your friend because you know him. So it's still, the bottom line is you need to find a way to network your way into the donor, to personalize the network that you're creating with your donor. So to create a higher level of interest and effectiveness with the donor. I totally agree with both comments. One last question. I wouldn't want to monopolize. It was mentioned, Victor mentioned, one of the challenges for Latin America is the professionalization of the industry. I've been in this business for 4 years. Uh, you don't get that training how to do fundraising, how to approach, and just picking up on this topic, how to personalize relations. Opportunities do you identify, especially to what are the key items to make this professionalization? Technology is a blessing nowadays. I remember when I was getting into a fundraising agency in Spain, and to actually have to pick up the phone and call a Spanish girl. I'm calling from an organization in Honduras, and we're speaking in Spanish. And on the other side of the world, they have become more professional. People who are hiring these cooperation agencies have a major in this. They have a career in this, and they're fascinated to talk to us. They're speaking Spanish. Somebody from Haiti, from Bolivia, and sometimes I went out, and they said, "Oh, we're not working in your country at this moment, but call Scandinavia, because they are interested in this topic of, and talk to this guy on the phone And now you can use Zoom, you can use Skype, email. Now in the past you had to actually travel to Europe in person, but now with this technology, I just have to, if I have to write or call, I call first. What I want to do is to make it personal, like to personalize the whole thing. If I have travel, I don't just make one travel. I make the whole tour. And so well, before COVID, we had to do that. Now with COVID, we are using technology to take advantage, and you were using the phone, WhatsApp, and everything just to network and to personalize the relationship they're going to build with your donor. More totally agree. Couldn't agree with you more. This professionalization needs to needs to go for all your staff. There are a lot of free training that you can give to your staff. There's IFC in Europe. That's one of the most expensive, events. If somebody can afford it, you can go there. There's everything. There's a range for everyone. I think another one is see what other the state of the art organizations, the ones that are at the top, and see what they're doing and see copy their what they're doing, in the best sense possible, you know, to think. When once I was talking to somebody who said, and I said, this person, this guy, when he started a strike outside school, he was able to mobilize more people than Greenpeace. How can this happen? So there are a lot of lessons to be learned to see what other people are doing, to keep an eye, to keep your eyes open, to see that when you identify an area of an opportunity, something that you can tap into, then maybe you can start a wave that is going to be unstoppable around the world. And not just that, there's a lot of consulting firms, people who write blogs. So the access to information is super easy now, especially if you can speak English. So there's a lot of content that is being generated in different languages, and looking at there are different chapters, different offices in Mexico, in Argentina, in Portugal, in Brazil. I mean, in Brazil, there's a lot of information. Well, you know what? It's about it's time. I don't know if there are a few last questions. If you'd like to say, if not, well, I have to go now. I'm so glad, so grateful, Victor and Gustavo, for your time and the information that you shared was so interesting. I also, I think, it's going to be very helpful to everyone, and I wish everyone good luck, success in your fundraising endeavors. Take care. Hasta pronto. Take care. Bye.